Hi.
We are.
Just even talking about it, the feeling, the flow.
One of the things that we would like to say to you as we're just getting underway here is that until you've actually had the experience of actually quieting your mind and doing it on purpose and feeling the detachment that then you feel. In other words, sometimes you can't tell your nose from your foot. Maybe you feel numb even. Sometimes you feel as if you're floating. You feel detached. Once you really get there, then you are in a position, a vibrational position, where the thought that your inner being is then thinking, or you could say projecting to you, thinking to you. As you receive that thought, you can feel the clarity of it, the harmony of it, the good feelingness of it. But then when you follow that impulse, and that impulse leads to something, and it usually will right away, will lead to something that you can acknowledge is part of the unfolding of thoughts turning to the things that you want. Then you get this. But until you've actually had the experience of it, because words don't teach, then Esther just looks like another person who is standing here with lots of good ideas, who seems very sure of herself. Until you've actually allowed yourself to get into the receiving mode. Esther's not doing anything different than any of you can do.
Okay, we're on this cruise. It's super exciting. We have all of our kids here. 17 years ago, my husband and I got engaged in the Mediterranean. It was so cool. It's so cool to be bringing all of our kids back here and celebrating 15 years of marriage. So when I was 10, I met my husband, and I had like a inner knowing or calling that I would marry him. And we didn't live in the same town or anything, so lots of time went by, and then I saw him again when I was like 19, and he asked me out, and I said, no, I'm saving you for later. But we just went for it and came to Europe and got engaged and had kids. But at that time, I was like so young and frisky and ambitious and eager to sort of like step out on my own. But then when we got engaged, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to like do this part first. And this sort of, maybe in a traditional way, you would call it like a career part next. So I've had this like wonderful focus on family and mothering and all the deliciousness of that, but I've begun to have a calling. I don't know what it is, but it's like in connection to that part.
Well, there are a number of things that we want to say to you about that. We understand the different phases of your life and the different things that might be of keener interest at some times in your life than others. But we would rather say, rather than saying, this is the time for me to do that, what it sounded a bit like was I was really frisky, and then I settled down out of my friskiness for a while, and now I'm starting to feel frisky again. And what we want to say is that when you have understanding of your connection, then you feel frisky all the time. In other words, it doesn't matter what phase of your life you are in. And we know for sure that you felt a calling to so much of those things too. It isn't that you sacrificed your friskiness or your autonomy or your individuality in order to do other things. All of that was in your vortex. But what's in your vortex is something that is a changing and evolving thing. Because every day of your experience, you're having more life, which is causing you to put more there. You continue to amend what's there. And as you continue to amend what you put into your vortex, then when you're tuned in, you get different feelings about wanting to do different things. There's no right or wrong way to live. One of the things that we've been saying recently, and we think it really applies here, it will set you at ease relative to this subject, then we'll hear what you have to say beyond that. As humans move about with one another, not understanding their connection with source energy, and most not utilizing their guidance system in an effective way. Most not understanding the value of feeling good, or even why they do feel good, or why they don't feel good. So most people are living rather conditional lives because instead of tending to their vibration and tending to the process and evolution of the thoughts turning to things, instead they're just interested in the things. So they're interested in things happening fast, and they're interested in the things that have already happened. It's what humans want to call the manifestations, what they can see and hear and smell and taste and touch. And so because they're so interested in that part of it and not very aware of what it feels like as things are unfolding, they become conditional in their living. They become very introspective about the manifestations of the world. They want to catalog everything and pigeonhole it and call it right and wrong and separate it into piles and separate it into lifestyles. And then they stand in their particular clump feeling quite critical of other clumps. There's the Democratic clump and the Republican clump, and there's the gay clump and the straight clump, and there's the black and the white, and there's the mothers that go to work, and there's the mothers that stay home. There's the professional clump, and there's the doing what I feel called to in a creative sense clump, and so many people having so much judgment about the other clumps. And we would like you to think about just mixing all of those clumps up into a really diverse pile of clumps. Clumps, 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 some of everything. And then we would like you to think about just two clumps. Those in this moment in alignment with who they are, and those in this moment not in alignment with who they are. Because when you're in alignment, you find beautiful in all those clumps. And when you're not in alignment, you can hardly find anything you like about anybody. And so it's about finding that place of alignment and understanding when you've done it, and then knowing how to maintain it, and then proceeding. Yes? Helpful?
I love that analogy. It's so good. So I was wondering if you could give a definition to a few things. Like, we use the word prosperity. What does that mean?
Prosperity from our perspective. We may give you a definition from our perspective and from human perspective, because in some cases we are not seeing it quite the same way. Prosperity, from our point of view, is the sum total of what all have launched into the vortex. And the prosperity is a feeling or a state of being when one is in the receptive mode and letting what they've put in come out and manifest in their experience. So you could be prosperous with friends and prosperous with physical well-being and prosperous with financial well-being. In other words, it's the receiving of what you've asked for. The recognition that it's there and being in the state of letting it in. When humans think of prosperity, it is much that same way. But often, so many humans use the word prosperity when they're standing outside of it. Most people have a feeling of envy about the subject of prosperity. So instead of actually feeling the well-being of prosperity, which is the letting it in the moment and letting it continue to expand and show itself to you more and more, is a feeling of being on the outside of it. And so there's the feeling of prosperity where you just want to yodel down the canyon. And there's the feeling of prosperity where you just kind of wish you could get some of it out of their clutches because they've got more than their fair share.
I love it. So it's perspective. It's like your feeling or what you're looking at.
You could say everything. That's those two clumps we were talking about. There's the being tuned in, tapped in, turned on. There's under the influence of source perspective, and then there's under the influence of something else. You're going to receive sometime on this cruise something that Esther has had printed for you. Let the cat out of the bag. You can look forward to it. She thought about making it a bumper sticker, but she didn't think you should drive around with a bumper sticker on your car that says under the influence. So what it is, it's a dash card that you can put on the dash of your car, and it reflects up into your windshield or in front of a mirror. You can't read it when you look at it. It makes no sense. But when it reflects back, you can read it. Because you are always, if you are awake, you're offering vibration. And if you are offering vibration, law of attraction is responding and giving you vibrational harmony with something. So you are always under the influence of something. And so when you care about being satisfied, then you care about what you're under the influence of. And so these definitions that you're asking for could be, what's the definition when I'm under the influence, and what's the definition when I'm not under the influence?
Yep. Okay, so I have a funny story. So we're a group of 8 traveling this time. I have 5 kids, my husband and I, and a babysitter. And so we're flying from Miami to Barcelona, and we all get there. And I'm like, checking in to go to Barcelona, and they're like, that flight was this morning. I'm like, we had like the day and time wrong. So it was so funny to me, because leading up to this, my husband had some resistance of perspective. So we get to the hotel, and so we have to buy same-day tickets for 8 people to Barcelona. So we find it lines up perfectly. We're on this new airline. We're like, ooh, this is kind of weird. Like, it wasn't $2,000 a person. It's the same day. We're all in the same row. Okay, here we go. So we get to the airport, and we get on the airplane, and I start looking around, and everybody is like staring at me that I'm crazy, because I'm like, oh my gosh, the plane is beautiful. Oh my gosh, it's like clean, and there's space in the seats. And anyways, it worked out great. We got here, and the story makes me smile, because I'm like, oh my gosh, we're so prosperous. We bought 16 tickets to Barcelona. And of course, there's the other side where you could be looking at it like, we had to buy 16 tickets to Barcelona. So, we're prosperous.
Apparently. But let's chew on this just a little bit, because that's a lot to hold your vibration in place about, isn't it?
It was so fun. So fun watching it. And we didn't get our money back from the first 8. And we also had priority. We were premium, like first class, 5 out of the 8, which we all lost. And I am excited that we could spend so much on flights. Because if we could spend that on flights, then we could spend that on the other desires, and the other desires, and the other desires. Like, it's there.
We have a question for you. There's no right or wrong answer.
Okay.
And it'll be helpful in the context of what we've been talking about here. So, does it seem to you, now we know after the fact that you've had an opportunity to work this over in your mind, but does it seem to you at the moment that you were at ease immediately and having fun with it immediately?
Yes.
Well, then, that's what we're talking about you're so accustomed to being in that satisfied mode that there was nothing for you to overcome.
Like the driver of the car driving us back to the hotel was like...
That's what step 5 is. Step 1 is, you know what you don't want, so you know what you do want. Step 2 is, source is answering. Step 3 is, you get into the receiving mode. Step 4 is, you've practiced it so well that you're a master at the receiving mode. Mm-hmm. Seems funny that step 4 would just be really good at step 3, but that's the way we like to call it. Step 4 is just being really consistent at it. And step 5 is being back in what many would see as a step 1 moment and not losing your sense of satisfaction. And when you're moving through life living like that, then things do unfold for you comfortably. Because Sometimes when something starts to go wrong for someone, you're feeling satisfied, conditionally satisfied, as long as everything's going all right. But when something goes wrong, then you take the hit of it. And then as you take the hit of that, now you're queued up for more to go wrong and 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 more to go wrong. But if you're able to maintain your sense of satisfaction, even though something got a little wonky, then your recovery time is instantaneous.